Hello and welcome to the Joe Ligato Show. I'm your host, Dr. Joe Ligato, and today we're going to be talking about why clothing makers are finding it hard to break with China's supply chain. So why is this important? It's because we are recognizing that in really all aspects of trade, the West just cannot decouple from its collaboration, its trade with China. And we're going to look at this specific case in order to infer some things about other aspects of the supply chain. So apparel makers and factory owners who shifted their production to Southeast Asia are now moving back to the mainland. Rising wages have reduced the region's cost competitiveness. And this is a South China Morning Post study, or South China Morning Post article. So it starts off with an example. Lin Fang, in his 50s, is a businessman who owns apparel factories in and around China's southern city of Guangzhou. I'm going to have to learn at least enough Mandarin so that I can pronounce these words correctly, because I imagine I'm butchering these right now. His plants make clothes primarily for US and European clients. In 2020, as COVID-19 closed borders, he started a new production line for ladies' dresses in Hanoi to test the waters. Hardened by workers who were happy with less than half the monthly wages he was paying in Guangzhou. But he soon found himself shocked by how few orders came in from wary overseas customers. Last year, he exited Vietnam and shifted his focus back to Guangzhou. Okay, so wait, why were they wary? I don't understand. They were getting less money. Were they just making inferior products? Let's see. There's no point in talking about expansion or overseas shift now with weak demand, low labor costs, and tariff exemptions are meaning, okay. Okay, so it doesn't matter where they're at. There's just weak demand right now. So low labor costs and tariff exemptions are meaningless. So that retreat risks undoing some of the US $1.8 billion that's been spent, according to the China National Textile and Apparel Council, by manufacturers in China on turning to their Asian neighbors like Vietnam and Thailand. Several of those countries have, over the years, seen their exports to developed nations grow at the expense of Asia's biggest economies. He, the manager of a Guangdong-based apparel factory who asked only to be identified by his first name, discussing issues that may be politically sensitive, had a similar story. For more than 20 years, he operated production lines in Cambodia that made jeans. Over the past decade, however, he saw increasingly thinner profit margins as minimum wages crept up. Okay, so the reason they're not able to move their supply chain out of China is because other areas of Southeast Asia are also showing rising costs for workers, labor costs. And so I think that's beneficial to China, obviously, as we can see here, but it's also a part of China's strategy where they've been raising up the rest of Southeast Asia, other countries with their infrastructure projects, things like that, collaborations. And so win-win cooperation that China focuses on has actually helped them by making other countries kind of, I guess you could say, less competitive, because they're also paying their workers a living wage now. So interesting that it came to that, because China still has a competitive advantage, even if labor costs are the same, because they have such a core, how do I put this? They have so much of the supply chain. They have so many different types of trade goods, so many different types of expertise, that it makes sense that if all else being equal in terms of labor costs, that you would have your factories in China. Interesting. So the article goes on to say the amount he pays his workers in southern China's manufacturing city of Zhongshan is now just 30% more than in Cambodia, a gap that was much wider 10 years ago. Output rates at his Chinese factory are meanwhile about 20% better, plus the workers are more skilled. So exactly what I was saying. That's really interesting, because China has a really good relationship with countries like Cambodia. And so the fact that they're helping to improve the labor costs and working conditions of Cambodians is making China more more tempting for manufacturing factory owners. Okay, so it goes on to say expanding production in Southeast Asia isn't a rational decision. He said, I'm afraid the business slowdown will continue over the next year or two. Indeed, so integral is China to the global apparel supply chain that even shifting countries doesn't really reduce reliance that much. Vietnam's clothing industry still relies mostly on Chinese materials such as buttons, threads, labels, and packaging, with only about 30 to 40% of the materials made locally, according to Dong Thi. Oh, I cannot pronounce that Vietnamese name. The vice chairwoman of Vietnam's Textile and Apparel Association. So this is what we've talked about in other videos, which is that China just makes so many different things that even if you're making things in other countries, parts of those things are being made in China. So they might just be putting it all together, whereas the different components are made in China. And so China wins either way. That's the wonderful thing about China's philosophy of win-win cooperation, which is that they figure out ways to win no matter what's going on, whatever happens. Okay, so it goes on to say, when you start to talk about a chemical supply chain moving, a raw material supply chain moving, do you have the knowledge in the countries for the chemical mixer? Do you have the knowledge in the countries how to do mass production? Batas McGill asked. Language barriers and culture shocks are also hurdles to managing workers in Southeast Asia, some of whom are less experienced than employees in China. Michael Lascaux, a Vietnam-based businessman who links local apparel manufacturers with overseas buyers, said while political tensions have motivated some of his clients to shift to Southeast Asia, there's a fear of traveling to China and getting stuck there that hasn't translated into stable orders with local factories, leaving some garment makers struggling to stay afloat. Okay, interesting. Lascaux said most clients placing orders with factories in Vietnam are shying away from longer-term contracts, worried about weak global demand. With those lengthier commitments, many garment companies are living month to month, he said, with some even planning on cutting back to 4-day work weeks to trim cost. Okay. So they're talking about new orders being for final production, not for manufacturing. The cost of setting up new factories is very expensive, and the government isn't keen to have foreign plants that produce more pollution. So interesting. China is figuring out ways to benefit across the board here. They go on to talk about India, which has been one of the other beneficiaries of some manufacturing shift to diversify from China. Fast Retailing's Uniqlo has said it will scout for more manufacturing partners in the country, while Apple is also scaling up production there, looking to diversify from its main hub in the mainland. However, it remains to be seen whether any other nation, even one with about as many people as China, can compete with its vast manufacturing ecosystem. So, spoiler alert, absolutely, India cannot compete. China just has too many benefits in terms of skilled workers across manufacturing sector. India has a lot of skilled workers and things like computer science, but they are just not as cohesive of a society. They do not have as large of a skill set that would make them competitive in terms of trade goods. And so China's strategy just seems to have won here compared to India's strategy. Okay. So it goes on to say, but amid mounting global economic uncertainties and weakening consumer demand, many are discovering that finding alternative production hubs comes with its own challenges. Some are even upping stumps and moving back to the mainland China. That mature ecosystem established over decades in China not only ensures competitive price points, but also delivers stable quality and mass production that's hard to copy. So that's the thing here where you could make things for cheaper labor costs in other countries in some cases, but it's just not as high of a quality anymore. And people tend to have the mindset that China is very low quality trinkets, and that's a 30 years out of date mindset at this point. China is a very skilled labor force that is able to produce a lot of very high quality products now. So Laura McGill, the global head of sustainability at footwear brand Bata Group, finishes off by saying, I can't think of another place that can do the quality, the quantity, and the price as well as China. So that's our video today, talking about this part of the supply chain, why China is such a trade behemoth here. If you found this to be helpful, informative, anything like that, please give us a thumbs up. It does help us in the algorithm. Subscribe to our channel on YouTube and Rumble for more content. Tell a friend about our channel. We are being suppressed in the algorithm, and so any marketing, any help you can give us to open people's eyes to what's going on, show them our perspective, we would definitely appreciate that. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, critiques, please let us know down in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.